there's kind of a archetype of what female sports fans should be or is. I just think that it's not actually representative of female sports fans as a whole. I think the industry kind of limits itself with that stereotype. All in my mind was thinking, how do we reach a new demographic? How do we get Arsenal women in front of new eyes? We need to make women's sports like the coolest thing on the planet. But you can't really expect to convert people who have never been touched by sports marketing with sport.
Where did the idea for a 400 come about?
Get female athletes in front of female brand owners and just let them get to know each other. We started working with Chelsea, we started working with Tottenham, started working with Nike, Wimbledon, IMG, Giorgio Armani Tennis Classic. But actually, everything's changing now. Like in the past year of me doing 400, I'm seeing that shift.
Cherry, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
How are you?
Good. Busy. But like good busy, never bad.
You started full-time on your business only a couple of weeks ago.
2 weeks ago. Yeah.
How's that been?
Amazing. Like I wanted to go full-time from the beginning, but obviously had it alongside my legal job. And I just feel like very privileged that we're in a position after only a year of doing it part-time that we have the kind of structure and curiosity and interest and revenue where I can take like essentially a passion project and then build it into a full-time career, and it has amazing kind of growth opportunities. So yeah, really excited.
I want to ask you about your origin into sports.
Sure.
How did that begin?
So I think this is actually something that really surprises people when I tell them, but I grew up and I didn't play any sport at all.
Really?
Not a single sport. And not for lack of trying. Like I would have loved to be a great like tennis player, rugby player, football player. I just have 2 left feet and I can't throw a ball across a room. So it wasn't for lack of like charisma or trying, but I'm just not naturally gifted within sport. But what I really did love about sport was the experiential side. So my dad kind of like coached tennis in our local community, just like a few people here and there, but he was super, super into sport. And so is my whole family. Like my auntie plays hockey, she still does. My dad played loads of different sports. My sister grew up and she would play like rugby here and there. And I used to go along predominantly as just an experiential fan. So, you know, really experiencing the like electricity and energy that comes with sports. And that's what I really fell in love with. I've never been a participator, which I think people are really confused by, one, but also just surprised by when they hear that I've now built my career around the sports industry. That's exactly what 400 is, and we'll get onto it. But basically creating a space for those who might not be participators. So yeah, I just grew up loving the experience. I've really made this analogy like as I've gone on throughout my career in 400. But I really liken sports to like music gigs. Like you're going into a huge stadium, there's huge electricity, huge energy. You're watching people perform at their like top physical, mental capacity. And there's just this feeling of like community that you don't get anywhere else. As I say, the only comparison for me is like a music gig. But then there's this bias that to be a sports fan, you have to play sport. But we don't say like to be a music fan, you have to have played the violin, or like to be a fan of cinema, you have to have been a filmmaker. Like there's a real kind of inherent bias or just like a stereotype that to be a fan of sport, you have to have played. And it doesn't exist in any other industry. It's so interesting to me.
Although if you do go to a lot of Premier League games and you look at the fans, they don't play.
That's true. You're like,
they don't play.
You definitely don't play, but it's just that feeling of nostalgia of like, oh, I played as a kid. Like, I don't think I've met a single person in the sports industry in the year that I've been within it that hasn't led with, oh, I used to be a D1 athlete, or like, I used to play loads of sport and then at uni I had an injury, or but like they've always had a history of playing rather than viewing. Which I thought was really interesting. So yeah.
So you basically grew up and got the interest within sport just from a fan's perspective, and I guess it's the electricity, it's the energy that you picked up from going to stadiums or going to like live games. Did you feel anything that's like, I guess, different being a female fan versus like a male fan?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, firstly, there wasn't much representation with the fans in the stands. But it's also almost feeling like an afterthought a lot of the time, from everything from like the stadium experience to the merchandise to the broadcasting rights. Like, you know, there wasn't merchandise that was made that I would want to wear on a daily basis. The broadcasting of the women's games wasn't regular, so you couldn't watch it from home, or you'd have to make a real effort to kind of go and watch the sport, which for men, it's like quite easy and accessible hobby, or like it's easy to be a fan of men's sport because it's everywhere. Yeah. Whereas women, it's like if you're a fan, you really actually have to work for your fandom, which I find really interesting. And then, yeah, it was just like essentially being a female sports fan. I also think you're stereotyped a lot. There's kind of a archetype of what a female sports fan should be or is. And I just think that it's not actually representative of female sports fans as a whole. And yeah, it's kind of, I think the industry kind of limits itself with that stereotype, because then you're essentially only marketing and only targeting one type of woman. You're only getting brands in that cater to one type of woman. And actually it isn't reflective of like the whole female fandom.
Yeah, there is. I can speak specifically on football. That's the sport that I follow the most, and there is. I'd say it's definitely got like better, but there is definitely a level of like hostility towards like whenever like females are not even. I'm not talking about the players at all here. I'm even talking about like
fans,
just general the football space.
Yeah.
Like as soon as there's a woman commentator, as soon as there's a woman linesman, as soon as there's a woman pundit, like. People do, like there have been comments made, there have been, like Joey Barton on Twitter is like always talks about it.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it's, and even the people that don't talk about it, there is some level of like subconscious bias there. Mm-hmm. Like, is that kind of what you're talking about here?
Yeah, exactly. Essentially, that idea that if you're a female fan, you're not a real fan of sport.
Or you don't understand
it. Or you don't understand it, or you have to earn your stripes. Like, you know, the classic, and everyone says this, but name 5 players on the team, name where we are in the league table. Like, you almost feel like you're being questioned along your fandom and constantly trying to kind of, constantly trying to position yourself as a fan as opposed to just being welcomed in. And I think that's really hard for women. It's one of the barriers that has caused so much divide and a captive market within women's sports, is that idea that actually I don't want to look stupid asking questions. I don't feel comfortable in the stadium. I'm not seen as a real fan anyway. I don't want people probing me to name the team and name the players and name the stats. Like, I just want to come for a good time. And yeah, it's just a huge blocker. I think there's a real kind of ideology within sport that there's only one type of fan, and that's predominantly the male fan.
Did you ever have a personal experience where you felt like you didn't belong?
Honestly, no, not in any kind of meaningful way where I went away and felt uncomfortable, but loads and loads and loads of my friends have. Actually, one of the girls in 400, Morgan Riddle, she's Taylor Fritz's girlfriend. She sits within our kind of creator community and like just being a key opinion leader. And she went to a stadium and the guys behind her were like just kind of shouting abuse at her and being very kind of sexual and things like that. And she literally had to like lock herself in the bathroom and cried and then left. And that's not uncommon within, perhaps not in the last like year or and a half or 2 years, but definitely within the last 5 to 10. There's this real kind of negative energy towards female fans.
Yeah. So let's talk about that, I guess, like from a wider perspective and like the state of, I guess, global sports, like zooming out not just on football, but just global sports. What are the sort of like biggest barriers when it comes to women playing, enjoying, partaking in sports across the world?
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's a lot of barriers, and I don't want this to be completely negative in what we're speaking about with women's sports, because actually there's huge opportunity for growth. There's so many innovative companies coming through, so many fans really making themselves known, but there's like many barriers, like visibility, fan engagement, the commercial structures, investment. Like, it's almost a feedback loop or like a vicious circle where, you know, the the broadcasting rights aren't as extensive as they should be because brands aren't investing as much as they should be because there isn't fans that they can see in the stadiums that match their demographic. Like, it's essentially a chicken and egg situation all the time. And that's actually a huge driver of why I started 400 is because I thought, one, we need a new fan in the stadium. And two, we need to shift the commercial model of sport to include new brands. But until we bring in that new fan, these brands who these fans identify with aren't going to invest because they can't see their client in the stadium. They can't see their end consumer in the stadium. So yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of barriers in terms of women's sport growth and women getting involved with sport. But actually, everything's changing now. Like, in the past year of me doing 400, I'm seeing that shift. I'm seeing brands become more curious about women's sport. I'm seeing broadcasting rights obviously increasing and huge deals being made across the landscape. And it's feels like a really big moment of change, which is really exciting.
Yeah. Do you, when it comes to those barriers, do you like what's the key one? Like, is it a case of like funding? Is it just a case of like general bad perception? Like, what would you attribute it to?
I think so. From my experience within the sporting industry thus far, one is investment. There's amazing investors within women's sport. Like Michelle Kang is a huge one. Mercury 13 is doing amazing things for the kind of football world in terms of women. But investment is huge. If we don't have the remuneration that we need, if we don't have the money to improve the facilities, improve the training, improve the kind of even like the acquisition of players, like unless we improve with funding, everything from scouting to in-stadium experience, we're not going to see the growth that we need. But I think another one of the big barriers is essentially just the perception of women's sport. It's always an afterthought. It's seen as like a grassroots initiative. Like, I genuinely think up until even now, women's sports has been seen as a charitable donation. Like, brands will get involved as almost like a tick box for their D&I, and it's not seen as like a hot commodity. It's not seen as like, we need to invest in this because the future is incredible and because the fan base is exponentially huge and there's no cap and this is the future of what sport looks like. A lot of the investment and a lot of the perception has been around like, oh, they need the money, so we'll give them bits here and there. And we're seeing this huge shift away from that. But I think those are the predominant barriers, like essentially investment and then the general perception of women's sports being less aspirational than men's.
So I'm sure a lot of people will be asking, like, because with say investment or like whenever you talk about like money within the women's sports, the question always comes up, where does that money sort of come from?
Yeah.
Because the like female, like the stadiums, the fan tickets aren't as much as say the men's game, so they're not selling as many sort of like high ticket.
Yeah.
And then you talk about the brands. We'll talk about the brands maybe in a second. But yeah, sure. Like I know people will ask, like, where does that money actually come from?
I mean, a lot of it is essentially angel investors or VCs that are coming in. But for me, unless we fix, these are all like symptoms of a bigger problem. Unless we fix the fact that women's sport is seen as a capped market, unless we fix the fact that the perception of women's sport is seen as something for a very specific target market and specific brand, we're not going to have the investment that we need. Like, we need women's sports to be seen as a culture play. Like, we need women's sports to be seen as aspirational. We need women's sports to be seen as the coolest thing in culture. And then the rest will fall more into place. And, I really do think that a lot of clubs, there's a huge divide between the clubs that are prioritizing their women's teams, putting funding into their women's teams, putting core structures in for their women's teams, even like training centers, the best nutrition, the best, everything. And those who aren't, and there's still such a large portion who aren't focusing on their women's teams. And that's something as well, like there's an internal issue. It's not just about external funding, it's about internal focus. And some of the clubs just aren't ready or don't see the opportunity within their women's team.
But again, that goes back to what you said before. It's perception. It seems like the primary driver of all of this.
Yeah, it's perception. And that's exactly why I started 400, because essentially I thought we need to make women's sports like the coolest thing on the planet. Like we need to have, we need to include the demographic of what I call dormant sports fans into the conversation and the brands that come with them. So, 64% of women stop playing sport at 14. And then actually you think, okay, so what are we doing with the rest of these women? They're just left out of the conversation. They're not targeted to with traditional sports marketing. It's almost like a default that we're not even trying to activate them. Like, let's just stick with this small portion. We're fine. I'd love to see the sports industry thinking bigger than that and saying, no, we're going to try and get all women to be sports fans. Like we want every single woman to identify with a club, to identify with a player, because that's where the growth is. Like once we get past this idea that there's a stereotypical fan, and once we get past this idea that the market is capped and that we should just be targeting our marketing investment, whatever, towards a certain fan, then the industry is going to completely boom. So, yeah.
We'll talk about how to fix the perception in a second, because I'm interested in that. But like, once that perception is fixed, what are the sort of sequential things that happen from there? Is it like the perception's fixed, therefore more people go to games.
Exactly.
Therefore there's more money.
Exactly.
Therefore also more brands are investing in it because there's more fans.
Yeah.
And like, what sort of follows from, say, the perception being improved?
I mean, exactly what you've just said. I think whether we'd like to admit it or not, perception and something being culturally relevant and iconized is sometimes the first step in brands being interested, in fans coming over. Like once you position women's sports as being aspirational, the opportunities for like revenue and the kind of commercial structure is completely opened up. You have brands that would have never, ever thought of including sports into their marketing strategy or into their partnership strategy, now seeing that actually all the young girls love sports, and like the 18 to 25-year-olds are going to Arsenal or Chelsea or Tottenham matches every weekend. Like they have eyes on the pitch. Like we need to be doing something here. And same with merchandise, same with ticket sales. Like I think the men's side of sport takes for granted ticket sales as well. It's like not even a huge strategy internally in the clubs. There isn't like a specific person or team that's really focusing on let's get the men's ticket sales up, because they sell out every single match. Yeah. And there's season tickets holders that
they just increase the prices.
They just increase the price. Yeah. Whereas like in the women's side, they're fighting for stadium seats every single game. Like there's an extensive sales strategy in place. There's a huge team that focuses purely on stadium revenue and how we're getting people in.
But that's also why I guess the people, when they see that, they're like, oh, the ROI is pretty low, because we're employing a lot of people. We're putting out a lot of like paid ads to get more like people within the stadium. The cost per ticket is not as high as the men's game, so the ROI just isn't there. But what you're saying is, let's actually zoom out and like say, like actually see why is the ROI so low?
Yeah.
And it's the case of people aren't, the perception's not there. Yeah. So therefore, if we fix that, more people want to go to games regardless, and that's when the ROI will increase. And
also on this ROI point, because it's something at the beginning of my career with 400, and I'll get onto why like I started 400 and what exactly it is, but this ROI point came up so early on with every single client I spoke to early on in 400. What's the ROI going to be? Where's the ROI? And I think something that the sports industry forgets, or at least the kind of stakeholders within the sports industry forgets, is that we're trying to compare women's sport to men's sport, which has been around so much longer. It's got such an inherent fan base built into it because I guess universally men identify with sport.
Yeah, I mean, when you say it's been around for longer, I would argue it's been around since like Roman times, like because like the Colosseum was it was all like men, like so if you go, I know there were slaves and things, but if you do go far enough back, there's always been some sort of sports, and it's always been men. And
then when you see that as a fact, you then, I'm hoping, will see the kind of unfairness of trying to pin women's sport against men's, and why investors are saying, oh, but the ROI on women's sport isn't there, or, they're not selling out stadiums. Well, it's kind of comparing two things that are in completely different timelines. Like men's sport's been around since, as you say, the beginning of time, and women's sport has only really started emerging in the last maybe 100 in terms of just women playing. But much less than that in terms of commercializing and growing the fan base and really putting a kind of strategy behind it. So yeah, I think it's a really interesting point.
Okay, perception.
Yeah.
How do you fix that?
How do you
improve perception of women's sports?
I think that, this whole idea for 400 is essentially shift the perception. And how we're doing that is essentially intersecting sport and culture. In order to get these dormant sports fans, that I call them, the new sports fan who's never been targeted by sports marketing before, interested in sport, you need to do it through the mediums that they already identify with. So that's like pop culture, music, fashion, beauty, like the things that they're interacting with on a daily basis. You need to integrate sport into those things to naturally shift their perception of sport. You're never ever going to have someone who's not a sports fan suddenly loving sport because they've seen one great match or because one great athlete.
That's what a lot of people think, though. Because,
I know.
Like when the Lionesses won the Euros,
exactly.
Everyone thought that was going to be a turning point.
That was going to change.
And to be fair, it did for a short period of time. But I'd say long term, has it really pushed the needle?
It's definitely pushed the needle. But I think a lot of people are within the industry hoping for a silver bullet as such of, oh, well, the Euros are coming, so we're going to convert the 40% of women that have nothing to do with sports. And that's just not how it's going to happen. So with 400, what I thought was, one, we need to get more female-owned and female-centric, cult brands involved in sport. So these are the brands that are predominantly female-founded just because there's this trend towards kind of following female founders and iconizing female founders. But we need to get these brands that women who aren't targeted by sports marketing are really identifying with and get them into the conversation of sport, even if they're not investing yet. Just get them curious about sport, get them to see that their client or their end consumer is in the stands, and just open up that discord to those brands. But also get culture leaders and key opinion leaders involved. So these can be musicians, content creators, entrepreneurs. Get this group of women who are already seen as icons within culture to identify with sport. Because as much we don't like to say it or think it, individual women are so powerful at shifting perception. And arguably there's no kind of deeper or more cult-like fandom than the fan of a female icon. Even if we're looking at, and I hate to bring it up because it's kind of talked down upon in women's sport and sports industry, but look at Taylor Swift, Beyonce, the cult fandom that they bring is because women identify with them as icons. So we need to essentially take those people and just convert them into the sports industry, pull them into the sports industry and essentially let them shout about sport, let them experience sport, and let them essentially tell their followers and their fans that it's cool.
Yeah. That's when you say it like that, as you said at the very, very beginning, the only thing that's similar to a live sporting experience is a music concert.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're right, because the stadium's full, everyone's focused on one thing. I completely understand that. And it on paper, it seems plausible that you can convert, because they're, those, and they are majority girls going to say Taylor Swift, they're filling out stadiums and breaking records more male orientated artists are.
Exactly.
So the numbers are obviously there.
Yeah.
And they're also paying a lot more per ticket as well. Don't forget that. How does that conversion happen?
I mean, so to backtrack slightly in terms of what else we can do to shift perception, because I think there'll be slightly more nuances to this, is one is utilizing female icons to shout about sports. And that's what we've done with 400 is we've created a core collective of what we call key opinion leaders who will be the future of sports, the future investors in sports, the future brands that you see at the forefront, and then the future content creators, entertainers within sport. But something else that we really need to do to shift perception is move away from the stereotypical sports fan and what that means and more towards the experiential fan. So if you think about why gigs, if we're comparing sports and music, why gigs sell out, I'll go to a gig even if I don't really know the artist because of the energy and the electricity within the stadium. How we're currently marketing sports is all through players, stats, clubs, fandom in terms of like a traditional fandom, legacy, heritage. What club do you support?
It's also quite culty. It's like us as a fan base against you as a fan base.
Whereas if we start marketing sports as an experiential thing, like I'm going to the sport because I love going with my girls at the weekend. Like I'm going to sport because the electricity and the atmosphere is amazing. That's what's going to pull in and change the perception of sport. It's not going to be this continuous like banging on the drum of stats and athletes and clubs. It's going to be, okay, we need to understand that a lot of these fans are never going to come in for football or for rugby or for Olympics off the bat. They're going to come in for the experience. And then we can, build them into loyal fandom, and we can then build them into loyal followers of the sport who know all the stats and know all the players. But you can't really expect to convert people who have never been touched by sports marketing with sport. Yes. I know that sounds so odd, but it's like you need to convert them with culture and you need to convert them with feeling and experience. And that's the only way to do that first initial shift, and then bring in the education, then bring in the stats, the players, the league tables. But initially acquiring them, we can't attract non-sports fans with sport.
Yeah, you're completely right. And I've honestly never thought about it like that, because the way that they market it is the same that they would market to, say, like an avid sports fan. And it's like they are different people with different interests. And you're completely right. The life, they're a lot younger, I guess, in the journey. Yeah. So you can't treat them as a loyal fan because they won't resonate with them. You're completely right. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. So yeah, we mentioned 400 quite a few times. Let's talk about that in more detail now. Where did the idea? So I guess you saw the landscape, you saw all these things.
Yeah.
Where did the idea for 400 come about, and like why did you put it upon yourself to want to change the industry?
That's a good question. One, I just love the industry, but I mean, I started 400 literally at my kitchen table on a Tuesday night, and now we're doing keynotes for Nike. Like, it's crazy. But essentially, I started 400 because it was out of personal frustration, a lot of it. I was looking at the sporting calendar one day, and I was essentially looking at everything I wanted to go to that year, from F1 to rugby. F1 saying that if I had all the cash in the world to go to all the F1s, but like essentially I was looking at the sporting calendar and everything that I wanted to go to. And then I went to go message my friends, and I thought, none of my girlfriends will want to come with me. And it was that thought of, why don't my girlfriends want to come with me? Like, why haven't my friends, who I identify with in every single other way, from morals to personality to interests, why are they not identifying with me on the experiential side of sport? And that kind of just got me thinking about the sports landscape as a whole and what issues existed there in pulling over this culture fan, or what I call the dormant sports fan or the new sports fan, like why they weren't able to do that. Because if they were, my girlfriends would have been like, oh, I'd love to go watch the rugby at the weekend with you. I'd love to go to this football match. I'd love to go to F1. If we were selling sport as an experience, they would all be saying that when I messaged them on WhatsApp. So it was born out of this frustration, essentially, of my own social calendar not being full with sport and not being able to turn to my girlfriends and say, let's go to a match at the weekend. And then I really looked at the sports industry and found two big issues. One was this capped market. Sports marketing is shouting at people who are already in the stadium. Mm-hmm. We've spoken about it, but, it's very league focused, it's very stats focused, it's very athlete focused. And for people who have never been touched by sports marketing, this stuff quite literally means nothing to them. And then the second thing was, I was thinking, what would my girlfriends need to get involved in sport? One was this being marketed to in an experiential way. But the second thing was actually seeing brands that they love in the stadiums, like seeing brands that they think are really cool and that they use on a daily basis investing into sport. Because I think it would then change their perception of like, oh, my favorite makeup brand or hair care brand or fashion brand is investing into sport. There must be something here. Like there must be something that I'm missing. So with these kind of two issues of a capped market and then a quite frankly, like, I guess, less culturally focused commercial model, I started 400 and it was crazy. I started it as just female pro athletes and female-owned brands. And all I wanted to do was get these two people in a room together, or these two groups of people in a room together on the platform of sport. So get them conversing.
And record content?
Nothing like that. No content.
Get them in a room and just
get them in a room together. That was the whole idea, but the initial idea or the foundational idea for 400 was get female athletes in front of female brand owners and just let them get to know each other. Because in my eyes, I was like, female brands don't know about sport and they're not going to do it through traditional sports marketing. So there needs to be a conduit that comes in and says, meet this athlete, fall in love with this athlete, and essentially give them a partnership or an endorsement or a sponsorship. 400 really just started as me wanting female athletes to have better commercial models, like more commercial opportunity. And we started doing that, and I literally just reached out to people on Instagram, and the first members that we had I say members, but the first kind of people we had to join the collective or that were enthusiastic about the collective were like Keely Hodgkinson and Dina Asher-Smith, which was wild because that told me from day dot that we've got something huge here. Like if huge female athletes are already identifying with the brand and see the opportunity there, then we need to take this huge. And
How
then
did you get a reply from big female? Like it was just on Instagram?
Instagram messaged. Yeah, it was the weirdest thing. I think I'd like to think
from your personal account?
Yeah, from my personal account.
Wow.
I'd like to think there was some... I'd like to think I can curate the selling points of 400 really well and like get that across very quickly. And for the female athletes, it was just meeting these brands. They were finally given an opportunity to, not through an agent, not through some kind of corporate structure or business structure, just meet female-owned brands and female founders who would actually be signing on the dotted line of these sponsorship deals, endorsement deals, and partnerships. And it started as that. I reached out to rights holders. I was like, can we have your VIP box? I've got these female athletes. I've got these brand owners. In their eyes, the added value was we're bringing brands into the stadium. Hopefully, these brands will want to invest at club level rather than just athlete level. And it started as that. We went to Arsenal, Chelsea, Tottenham, Wimbledon, Giorgio Armani Tennis Classic, and I just kept pitching essentially this model that we're going to bring key opinion leaders and female athletes and brands into your space. And then it very quickly became much more than that. I started to see that essentially what we could do with this collective is utilize them as a marketing vehicle to change the perception of women's sports. And that's when we really moved into doing brand activations, events, social media campaigns. And it wasn't something I ever envisaged. It's not like I sat down on that Tuesday with a huge business plan, much to my dismay, because I think I would have saved a bit of time if I did. But I just saw a gap in the market. I saw a fan base that wasn't being catered to. I saw female athletes that weren't getting the remuneration they deserved. I just wanted to try and do something about it. And then about 3 months in, Arsenal, we had an event with Arsenal where I just brought all the 400 girls along. At that point, there must have only been about 50, 400
And when you say
girls.
400 girls, these are female athletes?
These are either female athletes, female brand owners, like Forbes 30 under 30 brand owners, or key opinion leaders who I think could shift the narrative of women's sports. And we did an event with Arsenal. It was in their hospitality section. And the head of marketing came up to me afterwards and he was like, she was like, sorry, the electricity and energy that you guys brought to the room was like undeniable. The feeling of being a new fan was completely emulated in your group. Like the excitement of seeing the pitch for the first time, the questions, like they were like, we haven't seen this in a long time because we have our core fandom and they come to every game, but we haven't quite seen the energy and electricity like 400 had. Could you create a social campaign that emulates that? I'm a one-person band and have been up until like a week ago. But I was like, yeah, I'll do what I can. Like, I had really great creative friends. My sister is like the social leader on running. My whole family is so creative. So I was like, yeah, I can find someone to do a point and shoot and just like a run and gun campaign. They gave me the fee to do it. I got 400 girls to feature in the campaign because, one, we were strapped for cash, but two, I was like, this is an added value. If Arsenal are going to promote this campaign on their platform, that's the first wave. But the second wave is utilising key opinion leaders, aka the 400 girls, to push it out a second time to their following. All in my mind was thinking, how do we reach a new demographic? How do we get Arsenal women in front of new eyes? And 400 girls are the way to do that. They'd share it to their story. They're featuring in a huge campaign on Arsenal Women's page. Like, they're going to share it. I know how women work. Like, thankfully, being the demographic that we're trying to target, I do understand how that kind of psychology works, which I think is another added value. And we did this Arsenal campaign and it tripled their ticket sales the day it released. And it got 9.1 million engagements within 2 weeks. And I purely put that down to the fact that, one, we didn't show, and this is not a discouragement to show athletes and gameplay and stats, but we were trying to reach a new fan, the dormant sports fan. So immediately I was like, we can't show the pitch, we can't show the players, and we can't show stats. We need to show experience. So one was essentially just showing fan experience, showing the electricity, showing the energy. It was a lot of POV shots of the girls that they'd actually captured on their own phones, and then professional content for our videographer, Josh. So one, why I think it did so well is it was this fan-based experiential content as opposed to pitch and players. And that immediately brings in a new demographic because they don't see a pitch and think, oh, I'm not a football fan, I'm just going to swipe off. They saw girls who were in a community-like environment, super excited, taking their own content, like things that you would identify with as an 18 to 25 or 18 to 30-year-old. And secondly, we featured the women in the campaign. So we had this extra wave of promotion that I don't think a lot of agencies utilize, is essentially a core collective that you can feature in campaigns that you know have a big following and that you know have a cult audience, and you can utilize them as that second wave. So yeah, Arsenal, we did the campaign, it tripled their ticket sales on the day of release. We had just amazing feedback. That was the first campaign I've ever done, and it was like literally one guy and me, and then the 400 girls. And then since then, it's just been inbounds. We started working with Chelsea, we started working with Tottenham, started working with Nike, Wimbledon, IMG, Giorgio Armani Tennis Classic, because essentially what 400 does is not only does it speak to this new fan, it involves this new fan. We're not just trying to speak to a no-faced kind of vague demographic. We have that demographic within our company, and they feature in our campaigns. They come along to our activations. They come along to our events. The brands that exist within there sponsor our events and are showing up at the forefront of sport where they never have before. And essentially, we've created like a cultural movement behind sport, which is so cool and just involves all the right people and players, from female athletes to brands to key opinion leaders. So yeah, it's been wild.
I was super impressed. Like, I didn't know what to say.
Thank you.
From everything you said, I completely agree with all of it. And
yeah,
especially when you mentioned the experience of like going into a football stadium for the first time.
Yeah,
I remember that as a young like boy. Like, I remember doing that.
Yeah,
and I remember like how magical it was. Like, seeing the scale of it, seeing how big it was, seeing how amazing the grass looked.
Yeah.
And then I think about it now, and it's like that just isn't, when I'm going to a football match, I don't think about that anymore.
It's no longer like a novelty.
But it's still, whenever I take someone who's never been to a football match, that's the first thing that they
like,
pick up on.
Wow. I remember one of the girls, when we filmed the Arsenal campaign, it's so sad that we couldn't keep in the audio. She was like, wow, it's so much bigger than it is on TV. Like, because she'd only seen it whilst watching her dad or her boyfriend, or, you know, the kind of stereotypical way that women engage with sport, which is in passing. And she was like, oh my God, it's huge. Like, it's such a huge pitch. Yeah. The players are so talented. Like, and look at it. They were surprised at the crowds. They're like, oh, there's loads of people here. And it's like, it was almost introducing them to a new demographic that they'd never seen before. Like, because they'd never been involved in sports, they'd never been targeted by sports marketing. Of course, they didn't know what the stadium looked like.
If you, again, like you're bringing up thoughts in my head that I've not thought about before. But like, if you think about it from like how I got introduced through it was through like my dad, and and like I'm sure he had a similar experience through like his dad, and like generationally it comes down. But the first game I went to was like with like an older fan, you know, and then they
teach you the ropes.
They like bring you in, and like you and then you go into the stadium with them, and you see the scale, but like they haven't had that, and that's like such a huge sort of
part of growing up,
enabler of like getting into the sport. I completely agree, because you remember that moment, like that's a moment that like sticks by you. Even if you're not a fan of the sport, like you still remember that, and you still like remember it fondly.
Yeah.
So like if it was to come up again, you would probably say yes to it.
Yeah.
Even if you're not like a die-hard fan.
Exactly.
It will still be an experience that you hold, and you probably would do again.
Yeah.
You know?
And
whereas they never had that growing up.
Yeah. And that's what we found. Like, I feel so lucky that I get to be able to give these dormant sports fans or the new sports fan that experience. And it's the same every single time. There's not a doubt in my mind that every woman can become a sports fan. It's just that we've been doing it wrong. Like, every time I bring a dormant sports fan or the new sports fan into the stadium, they have the exact same reaction, and it's always positive. And that's what tells me we're going on the right path, because if I bought these, and it's not 400 in capacity, it's just called 400. But if I brought these girls into the stadium, they never wanted to come again, and they weren't excited at all, and they weren't asking questions, and they weren't curious, and the brands weren't like, actually, we can include this in our marketing strategy, I wouldn't have a company. The reason 400's done so well, and the kind of foundation of the only feedback I need to know is that the girls are having a good time and that they want to come again. And I think even the growth and even inception of 400 is proof that there's a whole demographic of women out there waiting to be sports fans. I wouldn't have a company if there wasn't. Like, it's just crazy,
How did you get Arsenal on board at the very beginning?
Arsenal, oh gosh. I'd like to think of myself as a bit of a professional networker.
Because like I get like, well, to be honest, I don't quite fully understand how you got the big female athletes on. But like, fair
some
enough,
of it
that's
must
amazing.
have been luck, to be honest.
But then getting a huge club like Arsenal is a whole different beast. So like, how did you do that?
I was literally just sending emails 24/7 about what we were doing.
To random clubs? To
random clubs, finding people on LinkedIn, messaging them about it, messaging them about our offering. And honestly, a lot of it was white lies. I'm not afraid to say that, because we didn't have the huge community at that point. I had an idea, and I had enough kind of proof that it was going to work and that we could scale it. But a lot of it was like, we have an undisclosed amount of female athletes and brand owners we'd love to come into your stadium. And Arsenal, I mean, you'll see now from the football landscape, they've always been extremely culture first and not afraid to be innovative. And I'm not surprised that Arsenal were our first client at all. Not now that I know the sports landscape and I know the women's sports landscape. And they've got a really, really creative and innovative team there. And I think they were like, yeah, let's just give it a shot. Like, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. If it does, amazing. So yeah, it was mainly just reaching out, cold reach outs. And really, I think, as we've said before, like, I'm so passionate about it that when I speak about it, I think it's hard sometimes for people to not feel that like same passion. And like, I have such a clear vision of what I know women's sports can be. And I think I'm pretty good at articulating it. So it's really just about like conviction and then being able to know what to say to get them on board. So yeah.
What is so yeah, you talked about Arsenal, you talked about all these other clubs coming to you. What is the end goal? Like, what is that vision that you got clear in your head?
Sure. For the sports industry or for 400?
For the sport, for actually, yeah, let's talk about 400 first and then sports industry.
For 400, I have such a clear vision. At the moment, we're more service-based, like agency-based. And that's only because I don't think the industry is ready for our model yet, but it will be. And that's moving into a brand. Like, I want 400 to be a brand. I want us to do original events. I want us to do merchandise. I want 400 to essentially be the intersection between culture and sport for women, because that doesn't exist right now. Like, it really doesn't. The sports industry is very siloed to the sports industry, and then culture is on the other side. They'll pull in occasionally, but there's no brand that really represents that conjoining of the two. And I want 400 to be that. So I want people who join 400, whether that's as a member or kind of as just within the community coming along to events, to know that they are the future of sport and that they are this new sports fan that will completely disrupt the market. They'll bring along brands that the sports industry could never have dreamed of having in terms of how they traditionally marketed. It will, improve the commercial model of sport. Female athletes will get better remuneration. The future for 400 for me is a culture brand. It's not an agency. We're not providing services all the time. That's a large part of the revenue, but we're actually a kind of place that people go to find their fandom and find their place within the sports.
When you say a cultural brand, does that mean like content? Does it mean like events? Does it mean all those things?
Original media, original events, original merchandise. All of the above.
Amazing. Wow. That's really cool. And then sports industry as a whole.
Yeah, sports industry as a whole. I mean, it's hand in hand with 400. I see like stadiums filled to the brim with women, no longer an issue trying to sell tickets, female athletes getting the brand recognition they deserve, stadium experiences being enhanced for women specifically. And this is happening a lot in the US already. There's like purpose-built stadiums for women, which is amazing. But essentially just no longer having sports as a niche industry for women, having it as a part of the same way it is for men, having it as a part of like your friendships, your connectivity, your community, your weekly like experiences, your weekend, events. Like, I want all women to be sports fans. And from doing 400, I know that every single woman is a sports fan. They just don't know it yet. So, yeah.
Wow, this has been an amazing conversation. I don't know, is there anything else you want to mention before we wrap up? I think that's pretty much everything.
Not really. I think something I want to get clear is that the traditional female sports fans, when I speak about 400 and the new sports fans, I don't see 400 or the new sports fan as being better than the loyal or traditional sports fan that's existed and essentially grown the market to the point where I can even have 400.
Yeah.
I see 400 as a completely necessary fan to come in and give these loyal sports fans exactly what they want, which is better funding for female athletes, better brand deals, filled out stadiums, and the recognition that they deserve. Like, I don't ever want there to feel like 400 is an us versus them in terms of leaving behind the traditional sports fan. That isn't what we are. What we're trying to do is supplement the loyal sports fan and essentially help them get to their goals quicker.
Yeah.
Like, without, it sounds awful and there might be people that disagree with me, but without this new fan coming in, we're going to be waiting a long time to fill out the stadiums. We're going to be waiting a long time to get the financial recognition and remuneration that the female athlete deserves. And we're also going to be waiting a long time to see the whole industry shift, because essentially we're waiting for loyal fans to grow up. What are we going to do in the meantime? Like, great that we're bringing on a new fandom from really young of girls that now know what football is and they can play much more and they look up to athletes. What are we doing with the demographic of 18 to 30-year-olds who have been completely left out of the conversation? Like,
very true.
We need to bring them in, and we need to do it quickly. So I see 400 as a facilitator for the loyal fans' ideologies and like dreams of what women's sports is. And
it's not like, this is the other thing that I've seen is like sometimes it's the men's game versus the women's game.
Yeah.
And it's like the growth of the women's game is never at the detriment of the men's game.
No.
Or like vice versa. So
if anything, it can help grow the men's game and actually give the clubs another revenue stream that's as big as the men's. Like,
exactly.
Yeah, I think like the future for the sporting industry is really, really bright. And everyone's clocking on now, which is amazing.
Also, from like the club's perspective, I have a few friends that actually work in like the football industry, and like they've kind of reached the limit when it comes to like revenue. When it like in football, they've tried every avenue. Genuinely, they've tried every avenue. They've tried, you know, increasing ticket prices. They've tried expanding the stadium. They've tried like even like Sky Sports now. They tried like a different format of like football, where, you know, the five-a-side league. They're trying everything to squeeze out every like ounce out of the men's game. And frankly, they have, in my opinion, it looks like they've reached the ceiling. And something like this, where the stadium for the women's games, it's not full. The ticket prices are fairly cheap, and it just does seem like there's a lot of room for growth here. And it's an area that is, you know, when you look at the other side of it, when they're trying out like NFTs for like fans, it's like that they're trying so hard to do things, whereas on the other side of things, you know,
you've got like a blank canvas
if
ready
you get more
to go.
people in the stadium, that's a lot more revenue, you know.
Exactly.
Like, the games are happening anyway, let's try to get more fans in the stadium, rather than trying to squeeze out every drop out of the existing fans. And
I think as well, sense. Like what you're saying internally is another perception shift of, I want the men's teams to not see the women's side, and so many do. I need to like shout out Arsenal, Tottenham, Chelsea and Man City. Like, they're the clients that we've worked with so far. I'm sure there's loads of others, but they are really focused on the women's teams and they see the growth. But what I think there needs to be a perception shift in the market as a whole is like, don't see your women's team as a frustration point. See it as a complete blank canvas and a way to innovate. You can try new things. You can try new content. You can essentially recreate and rewrite the script of sports through the women's side. Like, it's so exciting. And that's same for this kind of dormant sports fan. I say all the time to our clients, like, they mentally think it's really hard to acquire the new sports fan because, as I've been saying, they've never been touched by sports marketing. They don't have an affiliation towards sports. In my head, I've shifted that perception to, they're a blank canvas. They're waiting for a team that they identify with. They don't have loyalty. They don't have a tradition with the club. They're not following the same clubs as their family follow. They're a blank canvas. They're ready for the taking. So it's like shifting that perception between, oh God, I don't know how to acquire this new sports fan because we can't use sport, to actually, these are literally blank canvases that we can project our brand onto, and they are just waiting to find a club. They really are. They're waiting to find a club that they identify with, or a sport that they identify with, or a player that they identify with. So,
question for you: do you think there's any value in? Because I've heard rumors of this as well as an idea. Instead of like the women's clubs being associated with the men's clubs, so like Chelsea, Arsenal, for them to just start their own
independent,
their own clubs.
For sure, absolutely. I think it's a two-sided coin. In terms of brands, they can, as you said, blank canvas, they can do what they want. And then that association with the men's game it's severed. And this is the thing. I think there's two sides of the coin. One side is the men's teams that are actually investing into their women's teams. They have the infrastructure. They have the tried and tested models. They know exactly what they're doing, and that's a real asset. On the flip side, like you're saying, if you start an independent league, if you start an independent club, you're no longer constrained by the traditional sports industry. You're no longer, at mercy to how everyone else does it. And that's why brands like Mercury 13, I don't know if you know of Mercury 13, they're essentially investing in women's sports and like rebranding women's teams and making them independent. But they're going to shift the industry because they're coming in and going, we want the logo to look like a luxury brand. We want the merchandise to look like luxury merchandise. We're not going to use the same distributors, the same suppliers, the same creatives that we use for the men's side. We're going to come in and build a whole team from scratch and a whole brand identity from scratch. And that way it's so easy to cater to this new sports fan and to the female demographic as a whole, because you're not kind of adding femininity on or like adding culture on. You're starting from that as a foundation, which is just so amazing. And I think those kind of brands are going to see amazing growth, like Angel City as a football club. The reason they've been able to grow so quickly, among many reasons, but I think it's because they have such a strong brand identity, and they've also utilized key opinion leaders and icons through their investment, or celebrities, to tell people that this is cool. Like, we're not following trends, we're making them. And that's what I think a lot more women's teams need to be doing, is not reacting to things, but creating them. Yeah.
I think that's an amazing note to end on, Cherry. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
How can people stay in touch with you and 400?
Sure. So 400 Club Comms on Instagram. So 400 the word and then Club Comms, COMMS. And then LinkedIn, I'm like a huge LinkedIn advocate. I just love LinkedIn for some reason. But Cherry Beagles on there. So cherry like the fruit and beagles like the dog. And yeah, I mean, we're going to be doing a lot more original events in the next year. We really want to build out the fandom community, like outside of our core community. So if you're interested in anything to do with sports, or have just never actually even considered going to a sporting event before, then we do it the best. And we do it like with amazing brands, amazing culture play, and in a way that really resonates with like the female audience. So yeah.
Absolutely fantastic. Again, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks so much.
I'm sure we'll chat very soon. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you.
Thank you so much for clicking on this episode of The Millennial Entrepreneur. The ambition of the podcast is to share relatable stories from young entrepreneurs doing some incredible things to inspire the next generation, including you listening wherever you are. We've been doing this podcast for over 3 years and the ambition has not changed. The only thing that has changed is the scale of where we want to go. We want to bring on bigger guests for you guys to show more and more relatable stories from young entrepreneurs across the world. The majority of you guys watching or listening haven't subscribed to the podcast yet. All you have to do is click that subscribe button wherever you're listening, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, and that will allow us to bring on bigger guests and ask the questions that you really want to hear. And it really is that simple.